Thanks, Ivan, and thank you all for joining our webinar today, Paperless Billing, How and Why. We've got a lot of attendees today, and I'm going to guess that that has to do with people having been at Momentum 2 weeks ago and looking forward to starting to implement some additional products within their Aderant system. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Roger Cottrell, and I am president of Simplex BI. I've been working with large law firms for almost 30 years now. And about 4 years ago, Ivan and I formed Simplex BI to really focus on consulting on the Aderant product. So we focus on implementation consulting, new implementations, as well as upgrades and the implementation of new products. We provide project management services. We've also helped several firms move from an on-premise Aderant system to Sierra. And we do a lot of SSRS reporting, business intelligence, and various integrations. So that's a little bit about us, and we'll get started with the meat of the presentation now. So the first thing I want to focus on is really the why paperless billing. And for me, it comes down to two issues. One, paperless billing helps you improve your operations. And two, it helps you enforce compliance. So I'd like to just focus in on those two things. We'll dig a little bit deeper on this. And then we're going to take a look at what the paperless billing workflow, what it would look like, what would the process could look like in your system. And then we'll also talk about how you go about implementing the product. So if we talk about improving operations, using paperless billing, pre-bills are simply delivered faster. The clients that we've worked with typically close their month, generate their pre-bills, and by the next morning after month-end close, those pre-bills are available on the attorney or admin's desktop to start the billing process. So if pre-bills get to the attorneys faster and they actually start working on the pre-bills, it can speed your time to cash because you can get your bills out faster. We have clients who have a deadline of the 15th of the month. They get probably 90% of their pre-bills back by the 15th, and they're out the door the following week. So I've seen a significant increase in or decrease in the time it takes that firm to get their pre-bills out the door. Really important aspect of paperless billing is that it eliminates duplicate entry. So, in the traditional billing process, and hopefully not too many of you are still doing this, but was to print out all of the pre-bills. You might put them in binders or, envelopes and send them out to all of the billing attorneys. Many firms are now converting the pre-bills over into Word or sending the Word version or a PDF version out, and edits are being performed in those documents. The downside of all of those processes is that when those pre-bills get returned back to billing, your billing coordinators have to enter all of those same edits that the attorneys and admins already made on the paper or electronic version of that pre-bill. Paperless pre-bill also provides much greater visibility to the status of pre-bills. So in a manual process, once most firms, once those pre-bills go out to the attorneys or the administrative assistants, you really have no way of tracking where that pre-bill is. If a partner decides to hand a pre-bill to a senior associate to review that, the billing department doesn't know that happened. If the pre-bill isn't returned, they don't know who to go to find it. So if you use paperless billing, you're able to track exactly where that pre-bill is today and how far along it has made it in the billing process. And of course, as we all went through, COVID and people working remotely, paperless billing is ideal for, the remote worker or hybrid offices where you have a lot of people working offsite and, in a much more decentralized environment, where you're going to be exchanging information. You really want to get rid of as much of the paper as you can. And if you can get it all into the system, it's really going to help improve your operations. Any questions so far, Arvin? Great.
Not yet.
The next thing is paperless billing helps you enforce compliance. Now, most firms have some policy around write-downs, and often those write-downs have to be manually approved. They may come back to the billing department and they see that there's a large write-down. An email may need to be sent to a CFO, a finance partner, managing partner. And it's really kind of haphazard on how that's handled. And again, there's no real good way to control that and make sure everything's getting approved. Well, with paperless billing, as part of the workflow, you can have the system evaluate the write-downs on the bill and make the decision on who needs to approve this write-down if an approval is needed at all. And then the visibility that I talked about earlier really helps you to enforce those billing deadlines. So as you're approaching month end or your deadline for having pre-bills returned to the billing department, you can go out and look and very easily see the status of each billing attorney's bills and have they even started working on these, right? How much is left to come back? So you can really try to push them to meet those deadlines. And then you also get an audit trail of the workflow and the changes that have been made in those pre-bills if you need to see what was done. So next we're going to take a look at what a paperless pre-bill workflow might look like. There's an infinite number of ways to implement this. So I've given you, we should look at kind of a basic workflow here, and we'll talk about how this process works. So following the typical month-end process of, firms close the month, all of the time and costs are in, probably hopefully the first or second business day of the next month. After you close, most firms go ahead and generate their pre-bills. And that is the first step in the paperless process. But the next step is something we call launch markups. And the launch markup step is where we essentially send out all of the pre-bills via workflow. So once the pre-bills are generated, and then you select those pre-bills from the billing desktop, you click launch markups, and the workflows engine just kicks in and starts delivering all of those pre-bills to whomever is supposed to get them. And that is based on how you have configured the workflow. So at some firms, the pre-bill may just go directly to the billing attorney. And you can build that into your workflow. Excuse me. And it would just go directly to the attorney for review. In some instances, the billing attorney may like the legal admin to review the pre-bill before the billing attorney looks at it. In that case, the admin is typically doing narrative edits. The admin may also be looking at task and activity codes to make sure those are properly entered and time entries have been coded correctly. And you might then have the pre-bill then go to the billing attorney. So lots of different options here. So I've just showed you it could go directly to the billing attorney. It might go to the admin and then to the billing attorney. You could even add in an option that after the billing attorney looks at it, it comes back to the admin for one final review. Okay? And in these steps, depending on what you've allowed the user to do via security, the attorney can edit the time entries, write them up, write them down, change the narratives, transfer time entries, etc. So the security is pretty granular so that you can really control what they can do. But the key thing to remember is that none of these changes have been committed to the database, to the Aderant system, until the end of the process. So all of this can always be undone. Now, again, depending on how you've configured or customized the workflow, you can include a write-down approval step. And that typically takes place after the billing attorney has reviewed the pre-bill. And this could be a simple rule. For example, that if the write-down is $2,500 or more, it needs to be approved. If it's, say, more than 10% of the base value, maybe that's what triggers your approval. So you can just, based on your firm's policies, determine when a pre-bill is required to be approved. So if no approval is needed, the workflow engine would send the pre-bill back to the billing coordinator. Okay? If a write-down approval is required, you can define who needs to approve that write-down. Okay? For some firms, again, that might be a CFO or a finance partner. You could also break this up based on practice group. So perhaps the practice group chair for that billing attorney needs to review the write-down and approve it. Okay? Once it is approved, it then goes over to the billing coordinator. Now, what happens when it comes back to the billing coordinator is, assuming there have been changes made to the pre-bill is in a status called pending edit. And that basically means, hey, there are changes out there on this pre-bill, and you need to go and accept those changes so that they get committed to the database. Okay? So the billing coordinator, when they're looking at their screen, will see all of the changes to the pre-bill, and they will have to approve them. If something looks a little bit funny, they may go back and contact the attorney to ask why this was done. Additionally, the billing attorney can add notes, or the admin can add notes throughout this process. For example, you might put in a note on the pre-bill that says, please double check that we are using the correct rate set. Okay? And when it gets to the billing coordinator, they will see that note and they will have to acknowledge that they've seen it. And we would presume that the billing coordinator would take action on that at that point. Okay? Once the billing coordinator accepts the changes to the pre-bill, it's back on the billing desktop, and you can just edit the pre-bill manually as normal, and then prepare your bill to get sent out. Now, there are some things that you should consider as part of this process. And one is that back here, after you generate the pre-bills, you can also prepare the pre-bills. And if you prepare them before launching the markups, the admin and attorney will be able to access the actual PDF document of the pre-bill. Okay? So sometimes on the printed pre-bill, we will put additional information that you might not see in the system. And people sometimes want to be able to see that printed pre-bill, or I know it defeats the purpose, but they may want to print that pre-bill out. So if you prepare the pre-bills first, they will be attached to the electronic version of the pre-bill that goes out to the admins and attorneys. All right. Transfers. This is one of the more difficult things to deal with in paperless billing. And I'm not sure how Aderant might make some changes going forward. So the good news is on a consolidated bill, if you transfer or the attorney transfers time from one matter to another matter within the consolidated pre-bill, that happens immediately because it's all within the same pre-bill. However, if it's a simple single matter bill and the attorney says, please transfer this to another matter, that transfer does not occur until this step over here where it's back with the billing coordinator and they approve that transfer. So it's generally not that big of an issue, but you do need to make sure that your attorneys are aware of it, because if they're working on matter one for a client and they also have a pre-bill for matter two, and they transfer a time entry from 1 to 2, they tend to think, oh, I transferred that entry from 1 to 2. Why isn't it showing up on matter 2 right now? And it won't be there until it gets accepted by the billing coordinator. Now, the workflow engine is flexible and customizable, but it is never going to be able to anticipate everything that your attorneys want to do with the pre-bill. I've seen firms where they want all the associates who worked on the pre-bill to take a look at it. So there is a feature in paperless billing that allows you to assign tasks. So if this pre-bill makes it to the billing attorney and the billing attorney says, you know, I really want Ivan to take a look at this, even though the workflow engine hasn't assigned it to Ivan, the billing attorney can go in and say, hey, send this over to Ivan. I'm going to type him a note that says, hey, can you look at this pre-bill, especially this issue, and let me know whether it's appropriate to bill it. So if all else fails, you can always use the assign task feature. Another thing to consider, and I've done this at many firms that I've worked where we've implemented paperless billing, is that I like to include a workflow, a special workflow that is for the billing coordinator only. And let me tell you why. Sometimes you get to a point where someone says, hey, I went through this process. It went to the admin, it went to the billing attorney, but I just want to take one more look at this pre-bill. Or can you send that pre-bill over to Ivan now? And under the normal process, you would have to come back here and launch a markup, and it's going to send it through this workflow process that you created. If you create a billing coordinator only workflow, the billing coordinator can launch the workflow and it will actually be assigned to the coordinator. And that enables them to simply reassign that workflow task to the single individual that wanted to see that pre-bill. And that way it doesn't have to go through this whole process to end up back with the billing attorney who requested it. Any questions so far, Evan?
No questions now.
All right. Now, another option with paperless billing is to implement the draft bill review. So if you've gone through this whole process of reviewing the pre-bill, the next step is typically the attorney wants to see a draft bill. So once it's back with the pre-bill's back with the billing coordinator, you can prepare the draft bills and launch yet another workflow. Now, typically the draft bill review workflow is not going to be as complex as the pre-bill workflow, because at this point we are just reviewing to make sure that the bill looks good and making any final edits. So your draft bill review might be a little simpler, where it's just going out to the billing attorney and then comes back to the billing coordinator so that they can prepare the final bill and post it in Aderant. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how you go about implementing paperless billing. So this is not something to take lightly. You know, obviously the billing process is a major part of what we do when we work with the Aderant system. A critical part of a critical business process within the law firm. So my recommendation is to install the standard workflow, paperless billing workflow template. Okay? It may or may not already be on your system. If it's not, I would put in a support case and have that workflow imported, unless your IT department has the ability to do that. And the benefit of installing the standard template first is that as the product has matured, they now allow you to do some basic configuration of the workflow right in expert administration. So you can get the workflow set up literally in minutes once the template is installed. And what that will allow you to do is to start running some tests and look at what paperless billing is all about. I find it very difficult to implement something that I don't understand. And I find often at firms, especially with something like file opening workflow, you get firms that want to jump in and implement workflow, but they really don't even know how it works yet. And what happens is down the road, they say, oh, I didn't know it did that, or it was going to look that way. And they've got to kind of retreat, revise, and then go forward. So I think if you get a good understanding of how paperless billing works first, that's going to really help you throughout the implementation process. Because the next step, once you have that template, is to define what your workflow process or processes will be. Because you can have multiple workflow processes. I have one client who I think has 9 different paperless billing workflows. And it's all based on what the billing attorneys wanted. In some cases, it may be client specific, that it has to go be routed a certain way. So you want to sit down and define that process. And then what's really critical is before you start developing these workflows, that you validate that process with the end users, who are the attorneys and admins. Right? Again, what I've found sometimes happens is as accounting people or billing people, we know what the firm's process is and what we say is supposed to happen. But if you go out on the floor, you find out something very different might be going on. Right? For example, some billing attorney may have every single attorney look at their own time on that pre-bill. Right? The billing attorney is still in charge of submitting that pre-bill, but he or she is doing, a whole lot of other stuff that you might not know about. So make sure that the process that you define really fits the real world, and that you're not missing the boat on what the attorneys really need. And then you need to do exhaustive testing and data validation. You need to make sure that the pre-bills are going to the parties that they should be going to, that the edits are being saved, they're coming back into the system correctly, and then ultimately you're able to print out your bills. And then the last thing around the implementation is, after you've completed your testing, you need to figure out how you want to figure this out beforehand, right? But once you get to the point of rolling this out, you need to think about, are you going to roll this out to a small pilot group, or is this going to be a big bang, firm-wide, all right, in the month of June, we start doing paperless billing. And I've done it both ways. Now, I generally recommend that you go with the approach of a pilot group. The only time that I've gone with the big bang approach is if we have a firm that's coming off of another system. I'm sure many of you came off of Elite and went to Aderant. That's actually a really good time. If you've decided that you're going to use paperless billing from day one, you might as well just roll it out across the firm day one. And that way, that's all the attorneys know, right? If you start off with some hybrid process or you're giving them paperless pre-bills and then rolling out paperless billing later, it's going to be harder to transition them over. So for new installations, I like to go with that big bang approach. For existing Aderant clients, and almost all of you are existing Aderant clients, I recommend a pilot group. Now, that pilot group might be based on office or practice group. You really need to see what fits your firm. Or if you have a couple of attorneys that have, pretty simple billing, maybe you just want to roll out to them the first month, make sure that there's no quirks in the system, and then start expanding that rollout. Okay. So just to talk a little bit about how Simplex BI can help you with this process. We've done lots of requirements gathering for workflow projects. We can sit down with you and talk about what your process is and what you should build. We can help you design that process and then develop a test plan to implement once you have configured the workflow. I also provide a lot of testing assistance. I find for firms who start to use paperless pre-bill, it can be a little bit confusing about what's going on and who has the pre-bill now and how do I access it while I'm doing testing, and what was supposed to happen here. So we work closely with our clients to help them test. And then we can help you with documentation and the training and a rollout plan, and provide project management services throughout this implementation. So if you are interested in talking more about paperless billing and how you would implement it at your firm, please send me an email. Happy to set up a free consultation to talk through your specific issues and see if there's a fit there for us to help you out with your implementation. So at this point, this would be a great time to answer any questions you might have. Ivan, do you have anything there?
There aren't any yet.
Okay. Does anyone want to unmute and just ask a question? All right. Well, again, I'd like to thank you all for your time. Hopefully you learned something here today, and if you are looking to implement paperless billing, please reach out. Be happy to help. And hope you all have a great Memorial Day weekend.